Welcome to This Explainer. Let's jump right in, because today we're completely stripping away that classic Hollywood fantasy to get to the real story of Cleopatra VII. For decades, pop culture has basically force-fed us this image of a doomed, tragic romantic who just used her charms to manipulate powerful men. But the actual truth? She was a brilliant strategist, a fierce political mastermind, and literally the last true pharaoh of Egypt.
To really understand her reign, you have to hold two totally different images in your head. On one side, you've got the pervasive myth, the manipulative seductress. But on the other side is the historical reality. We're talking about a ruthless political genius, a polyglot, and a highly strategic ruler who is fighting tooth and nail against an unstoppable, ever-expanding Roman machine.
Section 1. The Myth versus the Pharaoh. Now, to truly get her, we have to examine where she came from, the deeply turbulent Ptolemaic dynasty. And let me tell you, this was not exactly a peaceful, loving royal family. They were utterly infamous for brutal betrayals, assassinations, and non-stop bloody civil wars. So her early life was defined by just sheer volatility. Picture this. She's only 18 years old, and she becomes co-ruler with her younger brother, Ptolemy XIII. But almost immediately, her own court turns on her. Before she even really gets started, she's betrayed, stripped of all her power, exiled from her home, and actively hunted down. Most people would have just disappeared into the sands of history right then and there, but not her.
9. That is the number of languages Cleopatra spoke fluently. Obviously, this was no ordinary queen. She possessed a towering intellect, meaning she could communicate directly with diplomats and generals from all over the known world. No translators needed. And even more importantly, she understood global geopolitics far better than almost any contemporary ruler of her time.
Section 2. Survival through Roman alliances. Knowing she desperately needed real military muscle to reclaim her stolen throne, Cleopatra looked across the Mediterranean to the biggest player in the game, Rome. And this is what kicked off her highly calculated and, let's be honest, heavily mythologized political relationship with Julius Caesar.
You see, this alliance wasn't some starry-eyed romance. It was a brilliant, hard-nosed transaction. Cleopatra desperately needed an army and rock-solid military protection to take back Egypt. Rome, on the other hand, was busy fighting its own wars and desperately needed Egypt's immense wealth and endless agricultural resources to fund those campaigns. It was a perfectly pragmatic partnership built on survival and ambition.
But then, things shifted violently. After Caesar was brutally assassinated in 44 BCE, the Roman world just fractured into total chaos. Cleopatra's world essentially collapsed again, forcing her to adapt on the fly. So, she strategically forms a brand new, highly dangerous alliance with another rising Roman power, Mark Antony. And again, this was all about her kingdom's survival. Antony needed Egypt's resources, and she needed a Roman ally strong enough to protect her borders.
Section 3. Octavian's lethal propaganda machine. This powerful political and military team-up between Cleopatra and Antony deeply threatened Octavian, who was Antony's main rival back in Rome. But Octavian was smart. He knew a direct military confrontation right out of the gate would be incredibly risky.
So, Octavian fought back with words first, launching what is absolutely one of ancient history's most effective smear campaigns. He relentlessly painted Cleopatra as this manipulative, dangerous foreign queen. He spread the lie that Antony had completely abandoned his Roman duties for foreign decadence. It was a masterclass in spin, framing the impending civil war not as Romans killing Romans, but as a noble, patriotic defense to save Rome from Cleopatra. And it worked. He systematically turned the Roman Senate and the legions completely against her.
Section 4. Actium and the Empire's Fall. Because Octavian's lethal propaganda succeeded so completely, Cleopatra's eventual downfall had actually begun way before any physical swords were even drawn. The narrative war? That was already lost.
But, of course, the physical confrontation was inevitable. The devastating climax finally arrived on September 2nd, 31 BCE, at the Battle of Actium. Antony and Cleopatra's massive fleets went head-to-head against Octavian's forces in a naval battle that was just chaotic, brutal, and totally historically decisive. This one clash literally decided the fate of the entire ancient world.
Actium was not just a defeat, it was the end of their empire. Now, in a heavily debated moment in history, Cleopatra's flagship dramatically breaks through the Roman lines and completely flees the battle. Antony immediately follows her, and that single action triggers the complete catastrophic collapse of their combined fleet. In an instant, the military backbone of their entire alliance is shattered beyond repair.
Which brings us to Section 5, a pharaoh's final choice. Following the unmitigated disaster at Actium, Octavian didn't hesitate for a second. He marched his forces directly on Egypt, eventually forcing Antony's remaining ground troops to unconditionally surrender. The walls were rapidly closing in on the great city of Alexandria.
In a final, desperate move, Cleopatra essentially offers up everything: her royal crown, her kingdom's vast wealth, even her own life, all in exchange for just one thing: an independent Egypt. But Octavian's ultimatum was absolute. He flat out refused. He had zero interest in an independent Egypt. He just wanted to keep Cleopatra alive, as a humiliated, conquered trophy to parade through the streets of Rome.
And as the tension peaks, tragedy strikes. Antony, trapped and desperate, hears a totally false rumor that Cleopatra is already dead. Believing he's lost absolutely everything, his empire, his honor, and his partner, he falls on his own sword, ultimately dying right there in Cleopatra's arms.
It's honestly crazy to think about the sheer speed of this historical unraveling. Within a single year, they go from the defeat at Actium in 31 BCE straight to the march on Alexandria and Antony's tragic death. It all culminates on August 12, 30 BCE. Cleopatra, trapped and completely out of options, makes her final defiant strategic choice. She ends her own life on her own terms, refusing to ever suffer the utter humiliation of Octavian's Roman parade.
The legacy of this fallen queen is just monumental. Whether she died by the famous bite of an asp, by drinking poison, or maybe a hidden blade, the exact method is still one of history's great mysteries, but the impact? Undeniable. Her empowered exit marked the absolute end of the Ptolemaic dynasty, and even more staggeringly, it brought the definitive conclusion to 3,000 years of independent ancient Egyptian civilization. The whole shebang, over.
So, as we wrap up today's explainer, it leaves us with a really profound question. If the victors are the ones who write history, how much of what we know is actually just ancient propaganda? When we reflect on this brilliant, fearless ruler whose legend still deeply shapes our world today, we have to wonder, if Octavian's vicious PR campaign successfully became the Hollywood myth we all just casually accept today, what other ancient truths have been hidden from us by the victors? Thanks so much for joining me on this explainer, and I'll see you next time.